Okay, I'll get started for today by just officially welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kap. Welcome to you guys here at the temple, and those of you guys that are joining us online. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the original teachings of the Buddha. It's more of a study group as opposed to the way I teach in some of our other programs, courses, and retreats, which is more of a traditional style of learning where I'm teaching and teaching and teaching and then opening up to any questions that you guys might have. In this particular class, what we do is we first start with meditation, then I move into studying the original teachings of the Buddha, where usually I invite students to volunteer to read a particular section of the teachings of the Buddha. Then I'll share for about 5 or 10 minutes teachings on that particular chapter, and then I will open up to any questions that you guys have here at the temple. And those of you guys online, you're also welcome to ask questions as we go as well. You can put your question into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. So if you guys would like to join for meditation, I will guide you guys in a session to be able to help us get started with our class. The way that I start with meditation is I do chanting to ease into the meditation. If you would like to see the chants that we use, they're on a laminated sheet over there on the table. You can see, because they're in the original Pali language, this is the original language of the Buddha, that his teachings are captured in this Pali language. And then I have the English translations as well. And there's certain courses and programs that I teach where I guide students in learning how to chant these chants. But here in this class today, we'll just chant together. If you guys would like to chant, you're welcome to. You don't have to. The chanting that we do, it's not a rite or ritual or ceremony or worship. It's not even prayer or anything like that. The Buddha didn't teach any of those kinds of things. He used chanting as a way to help his students commit the teachings to memory, because during his lifetime, all the teachings were spoken orally. There wasn't anything written down. So they used chanting where once every 2 weeks, they would come together and they would chant the teachings as a way to commit them to memory. And now we don't need that. We have books, we have videos, we have podcasts. So we use chanting more to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation. So after the chanting, what I'll do is start guiding you guys in meditation. And then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be completely quiet and you guys will be able to meditate. Of course, you're going to hear the occasional car or bird or dog or something like this. But all these sounds are impermanent. Whenever you hear these, you just bring the mind back to the breath. Don't allow the mind to dwell on that particular thought, but just cut that off and bring it back. You'll hear me guide you in meditation. Then after we have that period of time where we're all just meditating together, I'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting, and then we'll move into our class and learning today. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable, usually students will either sit in a chair or they'll use the meditation cushions. There's actually 4 different positions for meditation. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking meditation. If you're on the floor, you might have multiple cushions under your rear. This helps to get the hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, and allows the circulation to flow. So as many cushions as you need, feel free to use those. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use this, but some people find that other options are something that they find more comfortable. So you can put your hands and arms however you like. Some people like to put them on their thighs or their knees, their palms up. The practice of meditation, it isn't about everybody doing it exactly the same way. It's about finding what's comfortable for you. So your lower body and your hands and arms should be comfortable and relaxed. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, where if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be kind of complacent and dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could have a tendency to be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to do the chanting to ease us into meditation from here. And if you'd like to do the chants, you're welcome to, or you might just decide to close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Wat Tung Bhagavanhang Aphivateyami Savakato Mahakawata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavito Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Oto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body comfortable and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to your next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Just wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวะพุทธังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาควตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปโนมหาควโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to ease your way out of meditation, this meditation is called breathing mindfulness meditation. It's a primary form of training that the Buddha used to move his mind to this enlightened mental state. But there's other things besides meditation that you would need in order to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. You wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment, but you also wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. And because an individual needs other teachings besides meditation, that's why we have these classes for students to be able to learn the path to enlightenment and learn what it takes to actually move the mind to enlightenment. So today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we study the words of the Buddha using this book series that I share. There's 13 books that are in this book series. On Sundays and Wednesdays, we use Volume 1 as a foundational text to help you to build a foundation on the path to enlightenment. And then in this program, we use Volumes 2 through 13 in order to guide the program. And this is a 1.5-year program that students can attend here at the temple, or you can attend by live stream as you travel all throughout the world. You might decide to learn through this particular program. But typically students will learn in the group learning program or one of our courses or retreats first in order to develop the foundation. And then they'll move into a program like this, which is the Pali Canon and English study group. So if this is the first time you've been learning the teachings of the Buddha, this particular program, it's not a traditional style of learning where a teacher just kind of teaches and teaches and teaches and then opens up the questions. Instead, it's more of an interactive program, more of a study group than it is an actual class where it's a traditional style of learning. So what I do is I have these chapters, and we're actually starting a new book today. We're starting volume 10. And what I do is I invite students here at the temple, and those of you guys online as well, to be able to read these chapters. And then after you read it, then I will open up to questions after I've done some teaching on that particular chapter. As you can see, these chapters are actually quite small. They're not like multiple pages. A lot of them are even just one paragraph or just a couple of paragraphs. So if those of you guys at the temple would like to volunteer to read a chapter, that would be great. We have microphones here for you guys to be able to use, because that way the people online will be able to hear. All you need to do is get one of the microphones and turn on the switch to be able to read the chapter. And those of you guys in Zoom, if you would like to read, all you need to do is electronically raise your hand and I'll be able to see you, and then you can read, and we'll actually hear you at the temple, and we'll also hear you throughout the live stream as well. So is there anybody here or online that would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? Sure, if you would mind getting the microphone there. We have 2 microphones, so you guys can pass those around as you need. There's a gray switch on the front. You just click that on, and then we'll all be able to hear you.
Hello. So how long is the chapter?
Yep, that's it.
Right and wrong refuge. They go to many a refuge, to mountains and forests, to parks and tree. Shrine danger. That's not the secure refuge, not the supreme refuge. That's not the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. But when, having gone to the Buddha, the teachings, and the community for refuge, you see with right wisdom the 4 noble truths: stress, the cause of stress, the transcending of stress, and the noble eightfold path, the way to stilling of stress. That's a secure refuge. That's the supreme refuge. That is the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress.
Okay, thank you, sir. So first, let's talk about what a refuge is. What a refuge is this is a protection, and you're seeking protection. And for someone that's in danger, what the Buddha is saying is you might go to the mountains, to the forest, to parks, to tree shrines. When people are threatened by danger, they run to all these different places in order to get this protection from the danger. And what the Buddha is saying is that's not a refuge that's going to actually protect you. Those places can't protect you. It's not secure. It's not the supreme refuge. So he's saying that's not the refuge that's going to help you to gain release from this discontentedness or this stress. That's the ultimate goal of the path to enlightenment, is to eliminate discontent feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, displeasure, grief, and misery. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't experience any of these. Even the slightest displeasure in the mind or the slightest dislike. You're always in a good mood by the time you get to enlightenment. So the mountains, the forests, the parks, the tree shrines, that's not going to help you accomplish that particular goal. So the Buddha is saying the way to get this protection of your mind, is to go to the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And what he means by going to them is he means developing confidence, that one might have doubt in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. Typically, when you first come to the path to enlightenment, there is a certain amount of doubt. People doubt, did this person that we refer to as the Buddha actually exist? Do his teachings truly lead to this enlightened mental state that we talk about? Does this community that you're part of, is this community able to help you to grow and develop and move towards enlightenment? Of course, it's your independent journey. You're the one that has to do the work, but there's a community that you need to be part of in order to gain the support of resources and guidance and teachings to help you. And what the Buddha is saying is that's the secure refuge. That's the way to protect the mind and get to this enlightened mental state. and eliminating discontentedness is building confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And the way that you do that is not through blind belief. The way that you build confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community is to investigate his teachings and examine them. If you investigate his teachings and examine them, that's where you'll see the truth for yourself, because his teachings are independently verifiable. And then as you practice them, then the transformation of your mind, where it's becoming more peaceful and more joyful, this is where the confidence arises in the mind, that you have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And now you've gone to the Buddha, the teachings, and the community for this protection, for this refuge, because now you can protect your mind. Because now, if somebody's maybe disrespectful to you, you might get angry or frustrated. Your mind's not protected. Or say somebody close to you ends up dying. Your mind might be grieving or feeling misery. Your mind's not protected. It's not love that's causing that grief and misery at the time of someone's death. So your mind not being protected, it can go up and down at different times in your life. But the Buddha is saying here, to see the right wisdom of the Four Noble Truths. That's the very first teaching of the Buddha. In order to be able to get on this path to enlightenment and firmly get onto the path, you need to do what's called establishing right view, to understand what is causing the discontent feelings, what is the elimination of those feelings, and what is the path forward. That's what the Four Noble Truths are. He's explaining to you the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward in 4 simple statements. So that's how you have a breakthrough to understanding what's causing your anger and sadness and frustration and other discontent feelings, because as long as you don't know what's causing them, you won't be able to eliminate them. In the unenlightened state, we typically think that other people are causing us to be angry. So if you have that wrong view that other people are causing you to be angry, then what you'll tend to do is you'll push people away out of your life, thinking that that solves the problem, but it doesn't, because you just keep getting irritated or annoyed about something else. Or you might become bitter and harsh and hostile towards somebody, and then they choose to leave out of your life. Or you might put your expectations on somebody, trying to control them, get them to do things your way. The mind's trying to get its cravings fulfilled, its attachments fulfilled. And as long as the mind is misunderstanding and having wrong view, you'll tend to do this, where you push people away, become bitter and harsh, or put your expectations on people. And then the number of people you can spend time with becomes fewer and fewer and fewer, because your expectations are growing. Your wants, things you want other people to do, are growing. So you can get liberated from all of this, and you can get to this point where the Buddha is saying you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. And the way that you do that is train your mind. You liberate it from certain pollutions that he discovered. He discovered 10 individual pollutions in the mind. We refer to them as the 10 fetters, or some people refer to them as taints or pollutions or defilements. And when you learn what these are, and then you apply the teachings to be able to eliminate them, you'll see the peace and the joy start coming into the mind more and more closely. And it's the Eightfold Path, which is the path to enlightenment. There's 8 individual steps that are going to guide you in developing your life practice to be able to actively train the mind. And this is a teaching that I teach, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, in our foundational programs that a student would learn and develop as part of their journey to enlightenment. So here, having gone to the Buddha, meaning having gained confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community, says that's the secure refuge. That's the supreme refuge. That is the refuge, meaning the protection, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. The Buddha attained this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, where there's focus, concentration, clarity of mind, deep memory. Your personal, professional relationships really blossom and grow. You're never even in a bad mood. He gained this and accomplished this for himself, and then he just dedicated the rest of his life to helping people understand this and how to actually accomplish it for themselves. He didn't create a bunch of rules or commandments. He didn't try to convince you or force you to do anything. He didn't try to guilt or shame or fear you into doing anything. He's just teaching you what he did in order to get to this enlightened mental state, so you can experience the same release from discontent feelings. And you can see that for yourself as your mind's gradually moving closer and closer to the enlightened mental state. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter? You can ask here at the temple, and those of you guys online, as I mentioned, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom you can raise your hand electronically, and I'll be able to call on you to ask any questions that you like. You guys have any questions on this chapter? Okay, so I'm going to move to the next chapter then, which is chapter 2 in this book, volume 10. It's titled The Buddha's Way. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? Yes, sir. There's a microphone right behind you.
Beings are few who are reborn among human beings or heavenly beings because they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. Then the perfectly enlightened one took up a little bit of soil in his fingernail and addressed the monks thus: "What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Venerable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant. Compared to the great earth, that little bit of soil is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not even amount to a fraction. So too, monks, these beings who are few, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn among human beings. But those beings are more numerous who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. For what reason? Because, monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Venerable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant. Compared to the great earth, the little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not even amount to a fraction. So too, monks, those beings are few who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn among the heavenly beings. But those beings are more numerous who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. For what reason? Because, monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you very much. So the Buddha taught what's called the cycle of rebirth during his lifetime. He's explaining to you what we refer to as the natural laws of existence. He's not teaching you any kind of beliefs. You don't believe any of the teachings of the Buddha. He never taught you to believe anything. Instead, you learn his teachings, you reflect on them to independently verify them, and you practice them. And he taught this cycle of rebirth because this is what's truly happening, and this can be independently verified, that you can observe the cycle of rebirth and helping you to be able to see the truth of what's truly happening. But usually when you first get started, it's not something that you really approach. It's usually something you get to later, about a year and a half, 2 years, maybe into your development on the path to enlightenment. Usually when you first start, you're starting out with the core teachings of the Buddha, like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 Precepts. You're developing your meditation practice and things like this. These are all core teachings that you need to develop. But as you get going, you start to be able to see this cycle of rebirth more and more clearly. And one of the reasons why it's important to understand the cycle of rebirth is as you're lifting this pollution out of your mind and your mind's moving to this higher consciousness, it's not uncommon for somebody to observe their past lives. And you can actually have residual memories from your past lives. You may have even already had some of those residual memories and didn't realize it. If you've ever experienced what we call deja vu, if you know what that is, where you have these memories of something you're doing right now, you're like, whoa, I've done this before. I know I have, but you know it wasn't in this life. Normally when we experience that, we just kick it to the side and don't get, but this is residual memory surfacing from your previous lives. So there's these kinds of things, but there's even more profound memories that an individual can have about their past lives. And if you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth and you didn't understand this, and you were starting to lift the pollution out of your mind and you started experiencing these residual memories, you might think you're going insane. If you started to all of a sudden have all this fear from maybe being murdered, and you didn't necessarily realize that you've been murdered in the past, and you started having these memories of being murdered, or maybe you were sexually assaulted or something like this in the past, and maybe now your mind is starting to experience these memories, and it didn't happen in this life, but it can actually shake you up. But if you understand that these are from your past life, you can just set them to the side, because what's happened in the past is in the past. It really doesn't truly matter. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. So right now you're a human being, and this is the best, most ideal existence to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. So the cycle of rebirth is something the Buddha taught for different reasons, and he taught it very clearly. In fact, the next book that we're going to study, which is volume 11 of this book series, that entire book is all about the cycle of rebirth. And there's 5 realms that he taught. He taught the realm of hell, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. The lower realms, which are hell, animal, and afflicted spirit, the Buddha describes these as a prison, that once you get into these lower realms, it's very hard to get back out. But you will get back out. All of us have been in these lower realms at any given point in time, and now we're in this human realm. But being reborn into the lower realms, you have to go through countless rebirths to ever get back to the human realm. And getting to the human realm is the ideal existence, because here we can do the work to actually get to enlightenment, where the lower realms, they're able to develop their mind to a certain degree, but they're not able to develop their mind to enlightenment itself. So getting to a human birth or a heavenly birth is ideal, because there you can actually train your mind and get to enlightenment. None of these realms are permanent. Even the heavenly realm, those beings are still in the cycle of rebirth, and they will need to get to enlightenment in order to escape the cycle of rebirth. But oftentimes the beings in the heavenly realm are fairly complacent, because they're only experiencing pleasant feelings in that realm. They don't experience painful feelings and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant like we do here in the human realm. We experience all 3 feelings, and so do animals as well. So the ideal existence would be to get to the human realm to then be able to do the work, because with those painful feelings and neither painful nor pleasant, we tend to have built-in motivation to get to this enlightened mental state, because we don't like those painful feelings or those neither painful nor pleasant. So we have this built-in motivation to get to enlightenment itself, where the heavenly realm doesn't have that. So what the Buddha is sharing here is that beings that are in the human realm, it's very rare that they are reborn back into the human realm or into the heavenly realm. And he's saying the reason why is because they don't understand or haven't been exposed to or haven't had access to the Four Noble Truths. In order to establish right view, you need to be able to learn the Four Noble Truths, which is the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of this problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And the Buddha shares that if you die with wrong view, that you're going to be reborn into the lower realm of hell or the animal realm. And again, he never used rebirth in any of these realms as a way to guilt, shame, or fear you into learning and practicing his teachings. And he never used rebirth in the heavenly realm as a way to incentivize you to learn his teachings, because the whole goal of his teachings is to escape this cycle of rebirth, get out of this cycle of rebirth, not to be reborn in heaven. That's not the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha, but instead it's to escape the discontentedness of the mind, which then you're also escaping the cycle of rebirth. But he does share that by not understanding the Four Noble Truths and establishing right view, that an individual will be reborn into the lower realm of hell or the animal realm. So that's why he's saying here that in both of these aspects of this chapter, that beings aren't understanding, they don't have access, they haven't seen the Four Noble Truths, they don't understand it. And this is why they're being reborn into these other realms of the hell realm, the animal realm, and the afflicted spirit realm. That's what he's sharing here. But he shares in other teachings where if you die with wrong view, you'll be reborn into hell or the animal realm. So being the human realm is the ideal existence. Being reborn into the heavenly realm is not necessarily ideal, although those beings can get to enlightenment. And it's these Four Noble Truths that are going to help you to have this breakthrough to understanding why the mind experiences this discontentedness and how to actually eliminate it. That's the very first step on the Eightfold Path, to be able to establish right view. And then here, he's just giving a little bit of a summary of the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths themselves are actually very deep. This is not the actual Four Noble Truths themselves. This is just pointing to the Four Noble Truths, where he says the noble truth of discontentedness. That noble truth, if you study it in detail, it actually explains to you what the problem is. It explains to you what discontentedness is, and that this is the problem in the unenlightened mind. Then the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness explains to you that the cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment, the yearning, the mind's wanting and expecting, the mind's craving for things to be permanent, but yet you live in an impermanent world. This is what's causing the anger and sadness and frustration and other discontent feelings. Because if the mind has craving, a longing, a yearning, and it gets what it wants, it's going to get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if you don't get what you want, you're going to get painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. And you can't always get what you want because you live in an impermanent world. And even if you get what you want, say you really want a brand new car and you chase it and chase it and chase it. Okay, you get it. And maybe you're happy for a few weeks or a few months, but then it fades away. The happiness is gone, right? Because it's temporary. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. And your mind ultimately ends back up in the sadness or anger, frustration, or other discontent feelings. Cause of discontentedness is the craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, thinking something outside of you is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction or lasting fulfillment. So the third noble truth explains the noble truth of elimination of discontentedness. This is, if the cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment, then the elimination of it is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. If you eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments, and you train the mind, rather than chasing after things, that you pursue things as a goal, as an objective or an interest, and you just gradually work towards certain things that you need to accomplish, rather than what you want or what you expect. If you can train the mind to pursue its needs, then your mind can always be joyful. You don't see things externally as providing lasting satisfaction. You understand that it's getting rid of these pollutions that are in the mind that's going to actually produce the enlightened mental state. But as long as your mind's chasing, it will ultimately end up in discontentedness. But also if you're on the other side where you're indifferent and you just sit around and you're just lazy and you don't do anything and you're dull and you're lethargic, your mind's not going to be content and peaceful and joyful there either. So it's bringing the mind to this middle way where you gradually work towards a goal, objective, or interest where the mind can maintain its peace and joy, permanently for the rest of this life in that enlightened mental state. And that's where the real training comes in. So to eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments, we use breathing mindfulness meditation and we use generosity. These are two specific trainings that we use, but there's other things you need too. So that's why there's an entire Eightfold Path. You need each individual step to understand that and then apply it in your daily life. And that's what the fourth noble truth is. The noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. It is the Eightfold Path. That's the actual path to enlightenment. That's the way leading to enlightenment. And if you study the Four Noble Truths in detail, you'll be able to see that. And I teach that in various courses and retreats and programs. I have videos and podcasts where I've taught this. And I've got a course coming up starting on November 27th, which is a foundational course where students can come. You can come here Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I'll be teaching that teaching as well as others to be able to help you to learn, to reflect, to independently verify the teachings, and then to practice them. And as you're practicing them, that's where you'll see the real transformation to the mind. So that's why the Buddha is saying, okay, there should be an effort made to understand the Four Noble Truths. And then he just kind of explains the summary version of the Four Noble Truths. That if you are interested in getting rid of anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, that you should make an effort to understand these Four Noble Truths, because that's the real breakthrough. It's going to help you to understand the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. Any questions on this one? Yes, sir. If you could use the mic, then the people online could hear you.
I have two questions.
Sure. If you could do just one at a time.
Sure. The first question is: if you are born into the heavenly realm, can you then go back down into the lower realms again?
Yes, you can. It's not a permanent existence. And there's other teachings that the Buddha shares that that's typically what does occur. Because those heavenly beings are so complacent that they don't practice, they will oftentimes be reborn into the lower realms. They have the opportunity to get to enlightenment from that realm, but because of their complacency, they typically don't.
Okay. Yeah, and the other question is, if you kind of like are born into a human existence, does then and then you are born into one of the lower realms again, does you being born into a human existence for a lifetime make it easier for you to then go back up?
It really depends on the condition of your mind at the time of death. So let's just say somebody was reborn in the animal realm countless times, because that's what we've all pretty much experienced. You know, we're talking like 500, 1,000, 2,000 births in this animal realm. And then let's just say on our first birth into the human realm, now we come right out of the animal realm and right into the human realm. But in that existence, our mind's going to still have this animal consciousness. Even though we have a human consciousness, we're in the human realm, there's certain conditioning that we take on in the animal realm that continues with us in the human realm. This is why as animals, even though we're not animals, they think about it, because when you see an unenlightened being, we function very much like animals. We kill, we steal, we have sexual misconduct where we're going around having sex with lots of people. We do all these unwise things, much like what an animal does. So a being that has been born into the lower realms and is making their first entrance into the human realm, oftentimes they have a lot of conditioning from the animal realm. And this is where you can sometimes see people that are like serial murderers, or they might rape and have sex with people forcibly and things like this. This is because of their consciousness being conditioned from the lower realms. It's still decisions that they're making in this life, and they need to improve upon that. But then what we end up doing with those individuals is we put them in jail, or we put them in prison, like a cage, like an animal, right? And then oftentimes, if they haven't improved the condition of their mind by the time they die, they're going to then be reborn back into the lower realms, because they haven't done enough development in this human realm to reside continuously in the human realm. So now that you're in this human realm, I don't suspect any of you guys are a serial murderer or anything like that. So you're beyond that. And now you can develop your mind and become kind of like a better and better human being, where you're functioning more and more like a human being. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, life is effortless. In the unenlightened state, we really struggle. We have a lot of difficulties with certain decisions and relationships that we experience. But by the time you cultivate the wisdom on the path to enlightenment, you won't have those problems. You won't have those difficulties and struggles, because you will have fully trained your mind, and you won't have those difficulties and struggles anymore. You'll have the wisdom to apply to each situation. Sometimes you might even laugh at yourself as you're going on the path to enlightenment and you start gaining the wisdom that the Buddha shares with you. You'll look back to things that you did when you were earlier years of your life, and you might just start laughing, because the solutions that the Buddha gives you are oftentimes so simple and so straightforward. But when we were deep into that pollution and the defilement of the mind, we just couldn't see clearly. We just struggled so deeply with so many difficulties that we just didn't have the wisdom. And then as you cultivate this wisdom and you look back to your life in your earlier years, you might just start laughing at yourself about how insignificant that problem really was, but we made it so significant in our own mind. So, being reborn throughout these realms, we've all been doing it countless times, and now's your opportunity to end it and lay down the burden of carrying around this body and all the defilements and pollutions that are in the mind. And you can get to this peaceful and joyful mental state for the rest of this life. Sham, you have a question? There's a microphone there.
So usually the natural laws of existence are permanent, right? Well, not usually. So how did the realms work before humans came along?
So what the Buddha describes is, he says, the beginning of the cycle of rebirth is undiscoverable, which I agree with. We can't discover the beginning of the cycle of rebirth and what was happening then or even before then, right? So these natural laws of existence, they're here, they're permanent. That's why the teachings that the Buddha taught during his lifetime are just as applicable during his lifetime as they are now, because the same natural laws of existence. But what was going on before all of that, we don't have any inclination whatsoever, and we don't need to, because it's all in the past. Right now, in the present moment, you're in this human existence, you have a discontent mind if the mind is unenlightened, and you need to work on it, you need to fix it. So trying to discover what occurred at the beginning of the cycle of rebirth, or what you're talking about is even before that, it's undiscoverable, and it's not something that's going to lead to your enlightenment now in this life. So the Buddha just basically says that you should set that aside and really focus on the core path in order to get to enlightenment. And that's what I would advise an individual to do.
So the cycle of rebirth, well, the realms specifically might not be a permanent thing, because I mean, humans probably won't exist forever, right? So, but the universal truth of discontentedness, non-self, impermanence, those are probably permanent, but this realm stuff might not be. Would that be accurate?
So the way that these realms exist during the lifetime of the Buddha and prior to the lifetime of the Buddha and now and even beyond now, these realms are going to be there and exist. The beings inside of those realms aren't going to exist in those realms permanently, but the natural laws themselves are going to exist. So eventually, the world will get to a point where all these realms have been flushed out, that people and beings have made their way from those lower realms into the human realm, into the heavenly realm. Beings have ultimately done the work to get to enlightenment and then escape the cycle of rebirth. So right now, we still have trillions and trillions of beings, and these are, at one time there was even more, but now we still have these trillions and trillions and trillions of beings, in the human realm, we know we have about 8 billion beings. But if you look at the animal realm, there's still countless beings that are still making their way through that. Like if you look at an ant colony or, termites or things like this, there's just millions and millions and billions of those beings all throughout the world. So those beings need to make their way into the human realm or heavenly realm to be able to get to enlightenment. But I suspect that these realms will be in existence, but the beings inside the realms are impermanent. They're cycling through because they're impermanent. But the realms themselves are the natural laws of existence. These exist no matter what. But eventually, if there are no more humans and there are no other beings that are born into the human realm, then you could say, okay, the human realm no longer exists because there's no longer any humans here on this planet. But this is beyond what it would take for you to get to enlightenment. You don't need to understand these kinds of things in order to train your mind to eliminate discontentedness.
Right, I recognize that, but is it okay if I ask one more question along the
you can ask whatever
line?
you like.
Sorry.
But just understand that sometimes the answer is this isn't something you need to know in order to get to enlightenment. Because oftentimes the mind, I'm not saying this is the case, but oftentimes the mind has various cravings that it wants to know this and it wants to know this and it wants to know this and it wants to know this. And sometimes these questions are beyond our ability to be able to know and explain. And if our mind stays hooked to that or attached to that or clinging to that, then the mind can't actually do the work to get to enlightenment itself. So sometimes a teacher might say, oh, that's something that you don't need to know in order to get to enlightenment, because it's not. Because what you need to do is train the mind to cultivate these qualities of mind to be able to get to enlightenment versus knowing any particular information of something that happened, billions or trillions of years ago.
Sure, no, I definitely get that. It's more for me to get past the doubt that I have on the teachings as a whole. This is why I'm asking these questions. But the last one that I have is on this topic is in other suttas, it's mentioned that like this world contracting, world expanding. Do you remember that? So what is that talking about? Is that talking about the Big Bang, or is it talking about something else?
From what I've seen, I think what the Buddha is describing is human beings, the population of human beings, expanding and contracting, that this is what the world goes through. He may also be talking about the solar system itself and things like this. He didn't necessarily have that level of detail during his lifetime, but also he talks about his undeclared teachings, and he talks about how he doesn't declare whether the world is finite or if it's infinite, and these kinds of things. So that's all in the realm of what the Buddha describes as inconceivable matters. If you remember that particular chapter where he says speculation about the world would only lead to frustration or madness, and we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't speculate about the world. We shouldn't, think about conspiracy theories and speculation and all those kinds of things. Instead, what's going on in the present moment right now? Is your mind peaceful? Is it joyful? Or is it angry and frustrated? And then use his teachings in order to dispel and eliminate those discontent feelings. That's what's going to help you to get to enlightenment.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
I just have one more question. It's kind of slightly esoteric again, so I'm sorry that I'm not talking specifically about training the mind. My question is that is it possible to have direct understanding of the heavenly realms and the hell realms if you gain a particular level of consciousness, or to put it another way, how has the knowledge of these realms passed to us?
Sure. So as an individual becomes more and more enlightened, meaning eliminating more and more of the pollution of the mind, it's kind of like moving to a higher vantage point on a mountain. That if right now, if you walk out on the main street of Chiang Mai, you can only see that street and what's going on that street. But if you go up on one of the mountains around Chiang Mai, you can see all the interconnecting streets and how they all interact. So it's the same thing, that as you're lifting out the pollution out of your mind, you're moving to this higher vantage point or this higher consciousness. And now you can potentially observe your past lives, not only in the human realm, but in other realms as well. And this is what the Buddha experienced, and other people have experienced it too. Even today, there's people that have experienced observing their past lives. And this is how one can come to the conclusion that the cycle of rebirth is 100% true. There's a question like this that was just recently asked in our Facebook post, in our Facebook group, through a Facebook post. And I helped the person to see how to confirm the cycle of rebirth. And I gave them 10 different things that you can do to independently verify the cycle of rebirth, so that you're not believing the cycle of rebirth. But this is how it came about, is that the Buddha was able to observe his previous lives in these other realms, and then he explained what these other realms are. And then today, and even all throughout time since the lifetime of the Buddha, there have been people that have observed their past lives. But also you can even communicate with beings in those other realms in some situations, or those beings communicating with you, or you can have residual memories. You can view the consciousness. If you've ever observed, if you know what craving, desire, attachment is, where the mind's longing and yearning and chasing after things, it's like the mind's stuck in this continuous cycle. You're almost obsessing about something, and you're just going around and around and around. Or if you ever notice that certain situations in your life just keep repeating over and over and over again, until you cultivate wisdom that you need in order to overcome that particular challenge. These are just a few of the things. And I've in this Facebook post, I described that these 10 different ways that you can verify the cycle of rebirth. Even at one, if you guys have ever seen like a 4-year-old child or a 6-year-old child who has never seen a piano in their life, but they can put their hands on the piano and they can play like a master pianist. And this is the residual memories from their past lives. And there's other skills and other abilities that people have, not just 4 or 6-year-old children, but even people that are in their 20s or 30s. They can just all of a sudden have these abilities that they never trained on in this life, but these are residual memories from previous lives. So there's all this evidence that shows the cycle of rebirth. The ultimate proof for you is to be able to observe your past lives. That'll be the ultimate convincing for you. But you don't need to be convinced. Like, my role isn't to convince you of the cycle of rebirth. My role is to teach you how to eliminate discontentedness. And as you're doing that, you might observe your past lives. And this is why it's important for you to know about it, so that you don't think you're insane. Or if like you start hearing voices, and some people would call this person schizophrenic, and it's a mental disorder, but it's actually not. Nowadays, people consider it a mental disorder because they haven't understood and they don't understand what's happening. But if you understand what's happening, you can understand that these are actually real beings from other realms that are communicating with us, and you can get to a point where it doesn't shake you up. Just like a human being can say something and you can hear it and you just either ignore it or you address it or you walk on. It's the same thing with a being from the hell realm or the afflicted spirit realm or the heavenly realm. As you're getting contact from these realms from beings, you can just choose to ignore it. You can choose to move on. But the challenge is that people think they're insane. They think they're going crazy. They hear these very demonic voices that are in their head, and then they start acting upon that. And that's what those beings want you to do. And if you can understand the cycle of rebirth more and more, which this isn't necessarily the place where I usually teach that, but as you learn it more and more, and you maybe start experiencing these things, you can reside stable and steady, because you can just know to ignore that particular, voice or communication from beings in these other realms. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me check if we have any questions here online. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 3. Oh, there we go. Is there someone that would like to read this? Go for it, Trump.
Noble truth is not impossible to know. The noble ones are plenty. There are not only 100 vacha, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more male ordained practitioners, my disciples, who by realizing for themselves with direct knowledge, experience, here and now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. There are not only 100 vacha, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more female ordained practitioners, my disciples, who by realizing for themselves with direct knowledge, experience, here and now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. There are not only 100 vacha, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more male household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, leading lives of celibacy, who, with the destruction of the 5 lower fetters, will reappear spontaneously in the heavenly realm and there attain final nibbana, final enlightenment, without ever returning from that world. There are not only 100 vacha, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more male household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, enjoying sensual pleasures, who carry out my instruction, respond to my advice, have gone beyond doubt, become free from confusion, gained courage, and become independent of others in the teacher's teachings. There are not only 100 vacha, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more female household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, leading lives of celibacy, who, with the destruction of the 5 lower fetters, will reappear spontaneously in the heavenly realm, and there attain final nibbana, final enlightenment, without ever returning from that world. There are not only 100 vacha, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more female household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, enjoying sensual pleasures, who carry out my instruction, respond to my advice, have gone beyond doubt, become free of confusion, gain courage, and become independent of others in the teacher's teachings.
All right. Thank you, Sham. So here, the Buddha is essentially sharing how he's got all these students who have either made their way to enlightenment or one of the stages of enlightenment. There's 4 individual stages of enlightenment, and he talks about this in other teachings as well, but here he's just talking about it in terms of there's lots of people that have attained these stages of enlightenment. We call the first stage of enlightenment a stream enterer, and he uses this term stream enterer because just like a log enters the stream and it eventually gets to the ocean, if you get to that first stage of enlightenment, you're going to eventually get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, you will get to enlightenment. So we call that first stage of enlightenment a stream enterer, because once you get to that first stage, your mind won't regress backwards. You will have accomplished a certain amount of focus, concentration, clarity of mind, deep memory, and other beneficial qualities of mind that your mind won't regress backwards. Up until the first stage of enlightenment, if you became complacent, for example, your mind can regress. But if you get to that first stage of enlightenment, you won't experience any regression from there. Then the second stage of enlightenment, we call it a once returner, that if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back to the world one more time in the human realm and get to enlightenment in that life. Then the third stage of enlightenment is called a non-returner. This is an individual, if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you're going to be reborn into the heavenly realm, attain enlightenment there, and not come back to this world ever again. And then the fourth stage, which is where the mind's actually enlightened, this is called arahant. You've eliminated all the 10 fetters. In those other stages of enlightenment, you've eliminated various degrees of these individual pollutions. But by the time you get to the fourth stage, where the mind's actually enlightened, you've eliminated all the 10 pollutions or the 10 fetters. Your mind is no longer experiencing any discontentedness. Your mind's permanently in that mental state. And when you die, you've already escaped the cycle of rebirth. You're not going to be reborn anywhere. And then here, what the Buddha is describing is that he has ordained practitioners, both male and female, who have attained enlightenment. That's what he's talking about here. And I really like to point this out for you guys because there's a lot of people in the world that will tell you that women can't get to enlightenment, which is actually untrue. It's not true at all. Males and females can get to enlightenment. And you can see it right here in the original words of the Buddha. So if you're ever around somebody that tries to tell you that women can't get to enlightenment, or if you see it in a book, or if you see it as somebody talking and teaching at a temple, even if they're an ordained practitioner, they're wearing robes, they shave their head, and they're telling you that women can't get to enlightenment, this is untrue. And it's important to understand that because a female's mind and a male's mind, they operate exactly the same in terms of the way that the natural laws of existence are taught. There's different things that are in our mind in terms of what we do, what our personality might be, what our traits might be, what our characteristics might be. There's differences in terms of that. But in terms of the way that the human mind functions and the way that the Buddha teaches it, the male mind and the human mind functions the exact same way. And that's why there's no difference between a male getting to enlightenment and a female getting to enlightenment. I even know females that are enlightened and males that are enlightened. It can happen for males and females. It's a matter if that individual is willing to do the work. You'll even find some people that will tell you that a household practitioner can't get to enlightenment. This is untrue as well. So as you learn and you see the original words of the Buddha, you'll know what he actually taught. But then there's people in the world that will try to teach you things that aren't the teachings of the Buddha. And this is why it's so important to base your practice in the original teachings of the Buddha so that you can see what he taught and what he didn't teach. And then you don't believe that teaching. You learn it, reflect on it, and practice it to be able to see the truth for yourself. So these first two here is the Buddha saying that he has male and female ordained practitioners who are enlightened. And then he goes into male household practitioners and female household practitioners. This one here where he says they will reappear spontaneously in the heavenly realm and there attain final nibbana. These are individuals who are in the third stage of enlightenment. And he's saying, okay, I have students who are in the third stage of enlightenment. And then here he's talking about individuals who are in the second stage of enlightenment. Or possibly even the first stage of enlightenment in our male household practitioners. And then the same thing here with females as well. So any questions on this particular chapter?
So if you're kind of in, if you're a person and you're kind of, you lead a good life and you're aware of the noble truths and you meditate and you do all these things, is it usually possible for you to achieve enlightenment in one lifetime, or does it usually take many?
The way that I think about it is you're attaining enlightenment over multiple lifetimes, but this life that you're in right now is not your first life. Even though you might only at this time have recall of memories from this life, you've absolutely had previous lives. So we've all been on this path to enlightenment at different times potentially. Even like when you were a child, your parents were probably teaching you to not kill and to not steal and to not lie and not to take substances that cause heedlessness and things like this. And there's reasons why that this is taught because of the cause and effect, or the action and result, the results of our decisions. This is our kamma, or karma, some people call it. This is the core natural law that the Buddha taught, is this causality, or this cause and effect relationship, that by you making certain unwise decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome results in your life. But by you making wise decisions, it's going to produce wholesome results in your life. So the Buddha gives you very illuminating language to be able to help you understand that, where oftentimes our parents don't have the capability of explaining things to us in that way. They're just maybe can be harsh or aggressive or bitter with us because they have attachment and they haven't really learned themselves how to speak very kind and gentle and friendly and warm and respectful. So a Buddha is explaining to you his teachings in a very warm, very loving, very kind way. And the way that I think about it is we've all been on the path to enlightenment for countless lives at different times, but it's in maybe this life that you really firmly get on the path to enlightenment. But you could have been on the path to enlightenment in a previous life, and that's why you've been able to now make your way back to the teachings in this life. Because if you've gotten to, say, like the first or second stage of enlightenment in a previous life, you will more readily find the teachings in this life that you're in now. So oftentimes there's people who oftentimes are very young and they find these teachings at this particular time in their life, and they find that they learn them pretty readily and pretty easily because they've already been exposed to them in previous lives, and their memories are still there from those previous lives. And then there's other people who get on the path to enlightenment and they find it very challenging and very difficult because they haven't studied in the past. So all of us are coming to the path with different levels of pollution in the mind, and we will find different amounts of ability to be able to actively learn them and practice them. But I do think of it as it's been multiple lives. Even the Buddha talks about it, that he was in previous lives, very generous and practicing generosity a lot. And that's what helped him to be able to get to enlightenment in that last life as an actual Buddha, having done it all by himself. All right, let me just check here. I don't see any other questions. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 4. Read this chapter. A little bit chilly in here. Someone would like to volunteer? Go ahead, Chum.
With the teachings and yourselves as your refuge. But have I not already declared, Ananda, that we must be parted, separated, and severed from all who are dear and agreeable to us? But how, Ananda, is it to be obtained here? May what is born come to be conditioned and subject to disintegration, not disintegrate? That is impossible. It is just as if the largest branch would break off a great tree standing possessed of heartwood. So too, Ananda, in the great monk community standing possessed of heartwood, Sariputta has attained final nibbana, final enlightenment. How, Ananda, is it to be obtained here? May what is born come to be conditioned and subject to disintegration, not disintegrate? That is impossible. Therefore, Ananda, reside with yourselves as your own island, with yourselves as your own refuge, with no other refuge. Reside with the teachings as your island, with the teachings as your refuge, with no other refuge. And how, Ananda, does a monk reside with himself as his own island, with himself as his own refuge, with no other refuge, with the teachings as his island, with the teachings as his refuge, with no other refuge? Here, Ananda, a monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, mind as mind, mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Those monks, Ananda, with either now or after I am gone, who reside with themselves as their own island, with themselves as their own refuge, with no other refuge, who reside with the teachings as their island, with the teachings as a refuge, with no other refuge. It is these monks, Ananda, who will be for me topmost of those determined on the training.
Okay, thank you, Sham. So here, essentially what the Buddha is getting to is that in order to get to enlightenment, you need to develop this independent practice, this journey to enlightenment. It's your journey to enlightenment. You're going to need teachers, guides to help you along the way. only a Buddha can actually get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. And the last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago, this Buddha that is sharing these teachings. So everyone else needs teachers and guidance to be able to help them to get to enlightenment. But it's the teachings themselves that the Buddha shared that is going to be your guidance, but you need teachers to be able to guide you to that enlightened mental state. You wouldn't be able to just read this books or watch videos and get to enlightenment. You're going to need to come to classes. You're going to need to ask questions. You're going to need to be able to understand what these teachings are, and you're going to have questions along the way. A Buddha doesn't have questions that they don't ask other people. How do I get to enlightenment? How do I do this? How do I do that? A Buddha discovers it by themselves. That's one of the criteria that makes a Buddha a Buddha. But because you're not a Buddha, you're going to need that help. And here, what this teaching is Ananda, one of the Buddha's closest students, was asking him questions about this other student, Sariputta. Sariputta was one of the very close students of the Buddha who attained enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha, and then he died. And after he died, Ananda was asking these questions to the Buddha. And the Buddha was explaining to him that it's not possible for something like a human body to last always, right? That it's impermanent. Ananda, even though he was a very close student of the Buddha, he still had a certain attachment to people. He was even attached to the Buddha himself. He didn't get to enlightenment until after the Buddha died. So when the Buddha made people aware that he was about to die in 3 months, Ananda was like begging and pleading with him not to die. And the Buddha explained to him then in a different teaching that, hey, this body is impermanent. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. I need to die. So once somebody attains enlightenment in life, and then there's death, we call this final enlightenment. The reason why is because in this life, you can get to enlightenment where your mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, not experiencing any discontentedness, but you're going to still experience physical pain. But the physical pain that you experience in the enlightened mental state is very different than when you're unenlightened. When you're unenlightened, not only are you experiencing the physical pain, but you're experiencing the mental anguish that goes along with that. And oftentimes it heightens the physical pain and makes the physical pain more intense. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing the physical pain. You're not experiencing the mental anguish that goes along with it. So therefore, oftentimes the physical pain in the enlightened mental state is very muted compared to what it was when you were off the path to enlightenment. So we call it final enlightenment because during this life, while you can train your mind to get to enlightenment and you no longer experience any discontent feelings, you're still going to experience some of that physical pain. So if you stump your toe, for example, as an enlightened being, you're going to know you stumped your toe and it's going to hurt, but your mind's not going to be angry and frustrated and irritated and all those other discontent feelings, because the mind and the body are still connected together. Even though you're enlightened, there's still that one attachment that is there, that the mind and the body are together, and you can't eliminate that as long as you're alive. That's why you're still going to experience the physical pain, and you need that physical pain, because as an enlightened being, say for example, you're standing too close to a fire, you need that feedback to know that you're standing too close to a fire and you should make a decision to walk away and remove the body, because otherwise the body would be injured. So we call it final enlightenment, that once somebody actually is enlightened and they die, the mind and the body separate, and now this is final enlightenment. We don't call it death. So like, even though we say like the Buddha died or the Buddha experienced death, in reality it's final enlightenment where his body and mind separated, and then you no longer experienced any rebirth anywhere. So here Ananda is asking the Buddha about Sariputta, and the Buddha is saying that, something that's subject to impermanence, it's going to disintegrate. That's essentially what he's talking about, that when something's born, it's going to ultimately die, that there's this death. It's not possible for it to be permanent because this physical body is impermanent. And then ultimately he shares with the Ananda, okay, reside with yourself as your own refuge. What he's meaning by this is that you need to do the work to get to enlightenment. Nobody else can do it for you. It's your own independent journey to enlightenment. A teacher is here to guide you. A teacher is here to help you, but it's your own independent journey. So we provide the teachings, we provide the guidance, but you need to do the work. You're going to need to make 1,000,001 decisions to get to enlightenment. You're going to need to decide to meditate. You're going to need to decide to read. You're going to need to decide to come to the temple and reach out and get help from a teacher. There's countless decisions that you'll make along your journey to enlightenment. So that's why the Buddha is saying you are your own refuge, or reside with the teachings as your own island. And then he says, well, how do you do that? And then he explains here the four foundations of mindfulness, which he actually teaches in other parts of his teachings, but here he's pointing to them. And the reason why is because you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without these four foundations of mindfulness. What the four foundations of mindfulness are doing is they're teaching you the life cycle that this anger and sadness and frustration and these other discontent feelings go through. And if you understand these four foundations of mindfulness and you build awareness of these four foundations of mindfulness, you can actually get to enlightenment. But without these four foundations of mindfulness and other teachings too, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So I'll just give you guys a brief little four foundations of mindfulness, and then you can independently verify this to be true. The four foundations of mindfulness are: you need to gain awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. That your mind in meditation, as you're training and breathing mindfulness meditation and in daily life, you're going to need to cultivate the awareness of these bodily sensations that are occurring before your mind gets discontent. Before you get angry, before you get frustrated or irritated, or even before you get happy or excited, there's a bodily sensation that is occurring that you may or may not be aware of at this particular time. Let's take something like anger. This is a good one that people are typically more aware of. Before your mind experiences the feeling of anger, there's bodily sensations that are occurring. You might notice tingling in the body rising up through the chest. You might notice a tightening of the chest, maybe a little pain around the heart. You might notice some tightening in the throat. You might notice some heat in the face or some pressure in the skull. These are all indications to you that your mind is about to get angry. And your other feelings of discontentedness have bodily sensations too. Like if somebody ever talks to you about butterflies in your stomach when they're shy, this is referring to that queasiness that you get in your stomach before your mind experiences the feeling of shyness. So these bodily sensations are like an early warning system to you. It's an early indication that your mind is about to become discontent, because from there, you can cut it off and let it go. You can cut off, if you train your mind closely, when you're starting to notice those bodily sensations, you can cut it off. You can cut off those discontent feelings before it ever becomes a feeling. So you don't allow the mind to experience conditioned feelings based on some condition. And if you can train your mind to do that, you're really close to enlightenment. Your enlightenment's going to be in the next 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years if you can get to this point where you can observe and notice the bodily sensations and cut off and let go of discontentedness as a bodily sensation. Because if you miss it there, it's going to become a feeling, which in your journey to enlightenment, you're going to have these conditioned feelings occasionally because your mind isn't fully trained yet. But if you can catch it as a bodily sensation, that's ideal. It's just like if you were crossing the ocean in a boat, you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat, because once the water comes into the boat, you have a real problem to deal with. You've got to get it out. So once the anger comes into the mind, you've got a real problem to deal with, and you've got to get it out. So if you can cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation, you've just saved your mind a whole lot of difficulties. But if it does become a feeling where your mind is frustrated or irritated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling, you can cut it off and let it go there as well. If you don't cut it off as a feeling, then it becomes to the point where it affects the condition of the mind. This is the third foundation of mindfulness. If you've ever been angry for a couple of hours or a couple of days or maybe a week or two, you've been agitated. I'm sure you guys have experienced this, right? This is what the Buddha is teaching you, is to have awareness of the condition of your mind. And you can cut it off and let it go there too. And if you don't, then it feeds what's called a mental object. And in this example, the mental object is ill will. So what we experienced throughout our life growing up is we had certain cravings. We said, Mommy, I want chocolate. I want that lollipop. Buy me some bubble gum. Please, please, please. I want it so badly. right? And mom and dad bought us these things at some point, right? And we're like, yes, I feel so happy. Ice cream. Yay, I got ice cream, right? We got so excited when we got these things. And that craving became stronger and stronger. We were longing and yearning. We were thinking this chocolate and this ice cream was going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So whenever we were close to chocolate or ice cream or candies, perhaps, we would ask our parents, and we would maybe even beg and plead with them to give it to us. And in some cases, they would give it to us, and in some cases, they wouldn't, right? And if they gave it to us, we got pleasant feelings, like happy, excited, elated, because our craving got fulfilled. But if they didn't give it to us, we might have gotten angry or frustrated or irritated. And because of our wrong view, because of our lack of wisdom, we might have blamed mom or dad for our anger or our frustration. But as that anger and frustration was arising, there was some bodily sensation first that we probably weren't aware of as a child. Then it became a feeling in the mind where we were actually angry. Then it affected the condition of our mind for several hours or days. We were angry and irritated. And then it created and formed and fed this mental object of ill will, where now the mind is conditioned with this ill will in the unenlightened state, where more and more we have this anger, hatred, or ill will towards others that don't do things our way. When you have craving in your mind, when people don't do things your way, you'll get angry at them. You'll get frustrated at them because they're not doing things your way. And this ill will, this mental object of ill will arise in the mind. And now your conduct will become unskillful. You'll become bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And this is coming from this whole process that the Buddha is describing to you. Because if you understand this process, then you can get ahead of the curve, that where you see the bodily sensations occurring, you can cut it off because you know where it's going to go. It's going to become a feeling. It's going to start affecting the condition of the mind, and it's going to feed this mental object. So this is a little bit about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and I teach these in more detail in other classes, but he's sharing that this is the way to reside with yourself as your own island, as your own refuge, as your own protection, because this is how you protect the mind. That if you can get aware of these 4 foundations of mindfulness, when you notice those bodily sensations coming, you can cut it off, and you just saved your mind. You just protected the mind, that you didn't get angry because you were able to cut it off as a bodily sensation. And if you do this enough, with enough training, you won't have any anger arise, that all the anger will be gone out of the mind. But as you're transitioning, you need to be aware of these 4 foundations and cut it off as a bodily sensation or a feeling or condition of the mind. And you need to break up these mental objects and get them out of the mind. But once you've done that work to fully purify the mind, you won't have any anger arise. It's impossible for an enlightened being to become angry or sad or frustrated or irritated. It's just not possible. It's humanly impossible because you've eliminated the conditions that are causing the anger to arise. And this is what you do, and this is how the Buddha is saying you can be your own island, your own refuge. You can protect your mind yourself if you train in these 4 foundations of mindfulness. So any questions on this particular teaching? Right, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 5. Is there someone who would like to read this? I think you're thinking about it, right? There you go. By the way, for those of you guys here, there's a bathroom in the back of the room. Feel free to use it at any time. There's even some water over there the students provide if you'd like to help yourself to some water. Yes, sir. You.
Liberation of mind is the heartwood. So this holy life, monks, does not have gain, honor, and praise for its benefit, or the attainment of virtue, moral conduct for its benefit, or the attainment of concentration for its benefit, or wisdom and vision for its benefit, but it is this unshakable liberation of mind that is the goal of this holy life, its heartwood and its end. Suppose a man needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood, came to a great tree standing possessed of heartwood, and cutting off only its heartwood, he would take it away, knowing it was heartwood. Then a man with good sight, seeing him, might say, "This good man knew the heartwood, the sapwood, the inner bark, the outer bark, and the twigs and leaves." Thus, while needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood, he came to a great tree standing possessed of heartwood. And cutting off only its heartwood, he took it away.
I think we lost the batteries on that one. Did it get turned off? You're just about done, but there's some more batteries in that white bowl if you guys need to swap them out.
Whatever it was this good man had to make with heartwood, his purpose will be served.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the Buddha is talking about this heartwood. What heartwood is, if you take a tree, the core of the tree is the heartwood. And this is the highest quality wood. So if you're making furniture or some high-end product with wood, you're going to look for heartwood. The outer bark, the inner bark, the other parts of the tree aren't necessarily as high a quality as the heartwood. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, he used various analogies that people would understand. And during his lifetime, people understood farming, they understood harvesting trees and things like this. So they would understand an analogy like this, that this heartwood is used as a very high quality product to produce something like a high quality furniture or some tool or something like that, because it's the most dense and the most highest quality of wood. So he's saying the same thing, is that this practice that he's teaching, it is the heartwood, and the heartwood of this practice is enlightenment. That's the ultimate goal. That's the highest quality of what you're looking for, where the mind is unshakable. It is liberated. That's the actual goal. But he's also sharing here that the goal of this practice isn't gain honor and praise. Sometimes people might think, oh, look at you, you're a Buddhist. Wow, you're like, your mind's so peaceful and joyful. Look at you, you're so great. Well, if you think that way and you think like, oh, I'm going to practice the teachings of the Buddha because I want to look good for my parents or my coworkers or in the community, I want to look so great for everybody. This is the mind's conceit or the arrogance. And you've got to eliminate that in order to get to enlightenment. If you have conceit or arrogance in the mind, you're not going to be able to experience enlightenment. So the Buddha is saying here, and he says it in other places too, that the goal of this path isn't to have gain, honor, and praise. So if somebody thinks that they're above you in terms of their practice, this is the conceit. Or if you think you're above somebody based on your practice, this is the conceit. So while nowadays people here, like in Thailand, they will put ordained practitioners really high up in the world, that's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught that we're all equal. We're all equal, that we shouldn't put other people above us and we shouldn't put people below us, but we should consider everybody as being equal. And this is one of the things that comes from our animal existences in the animal realm, that since we were talking about the cycle of rebirth earlier, is that in the animal realm, there is a pecking order. We do need to know the matriarch of our elephant herd. She's going to show us where the watering holes are. She's going to show us where the food is. Who's the alpha male and alpha female of our pack of wolves? We need to know that because they're going to teach us how to hunt and all these other things. But when we come into the human world, we retain a lot of that consciousness of looking for a pecking order, who's above us and who's below us. And because of that, it hinders us from being able to experience very loving relationships where we just see everybody as equal. So we tend to talk down to people who we think are below us, and then we tend to talk up to people who we think are above us, and we're uncalm and shaken up when we're around somebody who we think is so far above us. But if you train your mind to just look at everyone as equal, you'll be able to reside more peaceful and more joyful. So this is one of the teachings of the Buddha from his other places, but here he's kind of pointing to that a little bit, where he's saying, yeah, the goal of this path to enlightenment isn't for you to have praise or gain or honor. That's not the goal. And the goal isn't even this moral conduct, even though you are going to be learning about moral conduct on the path to enlightenment, because as long as you're putting out harm through your intentions, your speech, your actions, your livelihood, that harm's going to come back to you and you will clean that up. The Buddha is saying that's not even the ultimate goal. And then the same thing where he says the attainment of this concentration, because you will experience a significant amount of concentration. The more and more pollution that you eliminate from your mind, you're going to see focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory coming into the mind. But he's saying that's not even the ultimate goal. And then he's saying this wisdom and vision for its benefit, that's not even the ultimate goal, even though you're going to have an enormous amount of wisdom. And when he's talking about vision, what he's talking about is you having the wisdom of knowing how to get to enlightenment, that you can see very clearly these natural laws around you. And then this vision that you have as one gets to see these natural laws very clearly and navigate the world through these natural laws. Where in the unenlightened state, we don't have vision. We don't see very clearly because we don't have wisdom. So that's why we struggle. We lack vision. We lack the wisdom to be able to see these natural laws. So we struggle and have difficulties. So he's saying none of that is even actually the ultimate goal. But the heartwood, or the highest quality of thing that you're looking for, is this unshakable liberation of mind. That is the goal. The unshakable liberation is that the mind no longer has these strong feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, guilt, shame, fear, all these other discontent feelings, that you've eliminated those and eradicated those from the mind so that the mind can be stable and steady or unshakable is what he's using here. And that's pretty much everything that I think that we've got to share here. Do you guys have any questions on this particular chapter? And just reminding those of you guys that maybe have joined us online since we started class, you can ask questions by putting those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. Do you guys have questions? Okay, so this is chapter 5. Here, I'd just like to show you that you have the words of the Buddha in these books. And by the way, these books are available at no cost online. You can download them. You can take them and go print them. Or you can get printed copies here at the temple just by reimbursing us for the printing cost. They're also available on Amazon as well. So you've got the words of the Buddha. You've got this reference, which goes back to the original source teachings in the Pali Canon. So if you were interested in what was the Buddha saying before this, or what was he saying after this, you can use this reference to go see. Then you have words from me as well to help you reflect on this teaching and be able to understand it in ways that I'm talking about here. Because while the teachings of the Buddha are very clear, very concise, and very precise, sometimes a certain teaching like this, you need to know about another teaching in order to understand this teaching. So sometimes what I'm doing here is I'm pointing out to you how to understand this teaching based on other teachings. And then I'm teaching you how to practice this teaching as well. So you've got words from me in here as well to be able to help you. Here I'm talking about conceit and helping you understand that. All right, so this is chapter 6. Is there someone who would like to read this? Please.
Anyone can produce Nibbana, enlightenment. And what, Ananda, are the 6 classes? 1. Here, someone of the black class produces black state. 2. Someone of the black class produces a white state. 3. Someone of the black class produces Nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. 4. Then someone of the white class produces a black state. 5. Someone of the white class produces a white state. 6. And someone of the white class produces Nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. 1. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the black class produces a black state? Here, someone who has been reborn in a low family, a family of Kandalalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or flower scavengers, one that is poor with little food and drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill-proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence, with the breakup of the body, after death, he is reborn in a plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. It is in such a way that someone of the black class produces a black state. 2. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the black class produces a white state? Here, someone has been reborn in a low family, a family of Kandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or flower scavengers. One that is poor, with little food and drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill-proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind. In good consequence, with the breakup of the body, after death, he is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. It is in such a way that someone in the black class produces a white state. 3. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the black class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white? Here, someone has been reborn in a low family, a family of kandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or flower scavengers. One that is poor, with little food and drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill-proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. Having shaved off his hair and beard, he puts on ochre robes and goes forth from the household life into homelessness. When he has thus gone forth, he abandons the 5 hindrances, defilements of the mind, things that weaken wisdom, and then, with his mind well established in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, he correctly develops the 7 factors of enlightenment and produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. It is in such a way that someone of the black class produces nibbana, which is neither black nor white. 4. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the white class produces a black state? Here, someone has been born in a high family, an affluent Katiya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces a black state. 5. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the white class produces a white state? Here, someone has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Katiya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence, with the breakup of the body, after death, he is reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces white state. 6. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the white class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white? Here, someone has been born in a high family, an affluent Katiya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garland, ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. Having shaved off his hair and beard, he puts on ochre robes and goes forth from the household life into homelessness. When he has thus gone forth, he abandons the 5 hindrances, defilements of the mind, things that weaken wisdom, and then, with his mind well established in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, he correctly develops the 7 factors of enlightenment and produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. These, Ananda, are the 6 classes.
All right, thank you. So here the Buddha is talking about ways to move from where you are in life currently into enlightenment ultimately. And during the Buddha's lifetime, there was a very strong caste system in place where if you were born into what's referred to here as a lower family, it was thought that, okay, you're destined for kind of a horrible life. And if you're born into a higher family, which is described here as someone who's rich or wealthy or something like this, you're destined for this great, wonderful family. And the Buddha accepted students no matter where they were born and what what families they were born into. And he referred to all of his students as noble. This was a way to refer to rich, affluent people during his lifetime, that if you were rich and affluent, you were noble. And this is why you would expose your right shoulder as you walked out into the world. The noble families would expose their right shoulder and people would know that they're nobility, they're rich and affluent. So the Buddha would have his students expose their right shoulder wearing these robes, whether they're in a family that lacked resources or in a family that had more abundant resources. If they came to learn from him, he was teaching them that it's your actions and your wisdom that determines whether you're noble or not. It's not based on where you're born. If you're born into a lower family or a higher family, it doesn't matter where you're born. It's about your actions, and it's about your wisdom that you have to have wholesome actions. And anybody who was learning the path to enlightenment, he would have them wear those robes and expose their right shoulder, which you see today, that they even do this. They expose their right shoulder as a way of practicing in the same way that the Buddha practiced. And now here he's talking about an individual who's born into a family that lacks resources, that doesn't develop their mind during that lifetime. So this is someone who was come into a family that lacks resources, doesn't develop their mind, and he's calling this a black state if somebody doesn't actually develop their mind. And now they're moving from this family that lacks resources, and they're continuing to do unwholesome and unwise things. And then the same thing here is that somebody can be born into a family that lacks resources, but then they develop their mind, and now they're moving towards this white state. And then he's saying somebody who's born into a family that lacks resources can also produce enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. So the Buddha was helping people to see that no matter where you were born, you can actually attain enlightenment. That oftentimes people think that it's based on where you were born and the circumstances you were born into, that's going to determine whether or not you get to enlightenment or not. But the Buddha is helping you see that anybody can attain enlightenment. It's not just people who are born into a family that lacks resources or a family that has resources, but instead he's saying that if you lack resources, you can get to enlightenment. But also if you're born into a family that has more resources, he's calling this the white class, you can also get to enlightenment as well. So he's going through that and helping an individual see that. And then ultimately, what he gets to when he's talking about the developing enlightenment is he's talking about cultivating the 4 foundations of enlightenment. The 4 foundations of mindfulness and the 7 factors of enlightenment. These are 2 teachings that you need in addition to everything else to be able to get to enlightenment. So here he's talking about that. In the Pali language, they refer to enlightenment as nibbana. We refer to it in English as enlightenment, and it's the same thing, just a different language. You might even hear people refer to this as nirvana. If you've ever studied anything in the Sanskrit language, they will use karma, nirvana, or dharma. These are the Sanskrit language. In the Pali language, it's gama, nibbana, and dhamma is what people will use in the Pali language. But when I teach in English because you guys will be able to understand the English in detail. So this description here that he's talking about getting to enlightenment, he's talking about ordaining in order to produce this enlightened mental state. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, rarer for household practitioners to get to enlightenment than it is today. Today, household practitioners have a much better opportunity to get to enlightenment now than they did during his lifetime. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, household practitioners were spending a lot of time just to fulfill their basic needs. If you think about if you lived 2,500 years ago and you were interested in having water in your house, this might be a whole day affair for you and other members of your family to take buckets and walk to the well, fill up the water, bring it to your house, dump it into some kind of reservoir or container. And you might have had to go back and forth like this for several hours just to get water to your house. And you might needed to do that every 2, 3, 4 days. Where nowadays we just walk over and we open a faucet and boom, we have water. Same thing with food, that it took an enormous amount of effort for a household practitioner just to get food. You needed to plow the land, you needed to fertilize the land, you needed to plant the seeds, you needed to water the seeds, you needed to maintain it, you needed to harvest it, you needed to bring it in and produce the actual food. Where nowadays we can just walk down the street to a restaurant and we can get food very easily and very readily. So there's a lot of things that we've improved upon in 2,500 years to give us a lot of extra time in our life. And we've got so much extra time in our life that people tend to fill it up with things like Facebook or YouTube or other things like partying and drinking and things like this. Not that there's anything wrong with YouTube or Facebook. We can use those things and benefit from them quite a bit. But if we do it extensively and we're doing it for non-beneficial purposes, that's where we're just kind of filling up our life with erroneous things that we don't necessarily need. So if you start clearing out some of these unbeneficial things that you might be involved in, you might find that you actually have a lot more time to meditate, to read books about the teachings of the Buddha, to come to the temple and consult with a teacher and get help on the path to enlightenment, which is going to ultimately produce the peace and the joy in the mind. So when household practitioners today have a much better opportunity because we have more space in our life to get to this enlightened mental state. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter?
Yeah. So I've heard in different traditions about how karma affects your rebirth in the next life. So I've heard a certain tradition say that your rebirth in the next life is just dependent on your state of mind when you die. And I've heard other traditions say that your rebirth in the next life is dependent on the entirety of your life and the karma that you throughout it. What is Buddhism's perspective on that?
What you're describing is actually one and the same without maybe somebody even actually realizing it, because the condition of your mind at the time of death is what determines your rebirth if you're going to be reborn. But the condition of your mind at the time of death is based on what you've done throughout the totality of your life. So if you haven't trained your mind throughout your entire life, by the time you get to death, your mind's going to be quite polluted. Whereas if you've done certain things, wholesome things to be able to train your mind, by the time you get to death, your mind's going to be in a better condition. But there's not like a bank account, or there's not any being that's overseeing what you're doing over the totality of your life and then judging to decide where you go. Instead, all you've got is this container of the mind. In this mind, at the time of death, based on the condition of that mind, it's then got certain causes and conditions that are going to lead to the next thing. So every single thing is a cause and effect, or action and result. There needs to be a cause or condition that leads to the next thing, as opposed to this accumulation of what's going on in the totality of your life. But these things are actually one and the same. So when you get to the end of your life, based on the condition of your life, or the condition of your mind, which is determined based on what you've done throughout your life, now whatever cravings, desires, attachments, if you have craving in your mind, that's what determines if there is rebirth. So that's the fuel, the craving, desire, attachment. If there's craving in your mind, there will be rebirth. What realm you're born into and the condition in that particular realm, that's what we would refer to as karma, or the results of your decisions. That's going to determine which realm and what condition. But it's craving, desire, attachment that determines if there is rebirth or not. But if you've done the work that you need to do in this life, you won't experience rebirth, and you'll have gone a certain period of time throughout your life where your mind's peaceful and joyful. You'll know that you've gotten to enlightenment, and there won't be any rebirth. But if you haven't done that work, then at the time of death, there is the potential to get to enlightenment at the time of death, but it's more likely that you're going to be able to get to it if you actively work towards it during this life. So it's not wise to kind of bank on getting to enlightenment at death. It would be much better to actively train the mind in this life to then experience enlightenment in this life, so that then you can enjoy the rest of your life with this peaceful and joyful mental state, and you'll know that you're not going to experience any more rebirth after this life. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter. Normally I take a break, but what I've been doing recently is just keep going. And if you guys would like to use the restroom, feel free to use it. Or those of you guys online, if you guys need a break, feel free to take a break. I'm just going to keep going. This is chapter 7. Is there someone who would like to read this? He needs a mic. You can change them, Sham. There's more batteries right there.
The humble. Now, Kunda, here humbleness should be practiced by you. Others will be cruel. We shall not be cruel here. The humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will kill living beings. We shall abstain from killing living beings here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will take what is not given. We shall abstain from taking what is not given here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Be uncelibate. We shall be celibate here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will speak falsehood. We shall abstain from false speech here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will speak maliciously. We shall abstain from malicious speech here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will speak harshly. We shall abstain from harsh speech here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will gossip. We shall abstain from gossip here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be craving. We shall not crave here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will have anger. We shall be without anger here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong view, ignorant. We shall be of right view here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Will be of wrong intention. We shall be of right intention here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong speech. We shall be of right speech here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong action. We shall be of right action here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong livelihood. We shall be of right livelihood here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong effort. We shall be of right effort here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong mindfulness. We shall be of right mindfulness here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong concentration. We shall be of right concentration here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong wisdom. We shall be of right wisdom here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of wrong liberation. We shall be of right liberation here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be overcome by complacency. We shall be free from complacency here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be restless and worried. We shall not be restless and worried here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be doubters. We shall go beyond doubt here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will have ill will. We shall not have ill will here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be revengeful. We shall not be revengeful here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be insulting and disrespectful. We shall not be insulting and disrespectful here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be domineering. We shall not be domineering here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be jealous. We shall not be jealous here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be materialistic. We shall not be materialistic here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be dishonorable. We shall not be dishonorable here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be untrustworthy. We shall not be untrustworthy here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be stubborn. We shall not be stubborn here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be arrogant. We shall not be arrogant here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be difficult to guide. We shall be easy to guide here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will have unwholesome friends. We shall have unwholesome friends here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be negligent. We shall be diligent here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be without confidence. We shall have confidence here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will see no danger of wrongdoing. We shall see the danger of wrongdoing here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be of little learning. We shall be of great learning here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be lazy. We shall be energetic here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be unmindful. We shall be established in mindfulness here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will lack wisdom. We shall possess wisdom here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will adhere to their own views, hold on to them forcefully, and relinquish, let go of them without difficulty. We shall not adhere to our own views or hold on to them forcefully, but shall relinquish them easily. Humbleness should be practiced thus.
Okay, thank you. So this discourse, I actually really appreciate it a lot. I enjoy all the teachings of the Buddha, but this one is like very clear cut. All of his teachings are very clear and very concise and very precise. But what he's giving you is a whole list of things that would be unwise to have in terms of the qualities of your mind. And he's listing them out. And then he's helping you to see how to cultivate the opposite of that. Because he's explaining to you what it takes to get to enlightenment in all of his teachings. And all of these relate to the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. So for example, he's saying others will be cruel. We shall not be cruel here. Well, if you're cruel, meaning you're harmful to others, then that harm is going to come back to you. That cruelty is going to come back to you through the natural law of karma. So he's teaching you to not be cruel, because how could you get to a peaceful and joyful mental state in a peaceful and joyful life if you're constantly being cruel to people? People are going to constantly be cruel to you. Your life isn't going to be very peaceful and very joyful. So he's going through a whole list of things here based on the natural law of karma that's going to help you to be able to get to this peaceful and joyful mind and this peaceful and joyful life. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but if you guys have questions on any of them, what they are and how do they help you to get to enlightenment, you can let me know and I'll answer those questions for you guys. He's going through all these different things, and you can learn these and then practice them. These where he's talking about right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Those are the Eightfold Path, and you can learn those in his own words. But then he's got this right wisdom and right liberation. This is what's called the Tenfold Path. By the time somebody gets to enlightenment, they're practicing the Tenfold Path. It's the Eightfold Path that leads to enlightenment. But then once you're actually enlightened, you're practicing the other two factors, which are right wisdom and right. You don't see words from the Buddha of how to practice those because you're already practicing them. It's not something that you need to intentionally do, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're already practicing what's called right wisdom. What right wisdom is where you have the wisdom of the path to enlightenment. And you could easily articulate it to others if somebody asks you, like, hey, what is right intention? Or hey, what is right concentration? Or what is right mindfulness or right effort? By the time you get to enlightenment, you're already practicing right wisdom, because you would have had to cultivate that wisdom for yourself to get to enlightenment. And it would be so easily accessible in your mind that if anybody asked you any particular question about the path to enlightenment, you'd easily be able to articulate it. And what right liberation is this is where your mind is no longer experiencing any discontentedness, that you've liberated the mind. It's now free of these discontent feelings. So there isn't any specific teachings of how to acquire right wisdom and right liberation, because that's like the benefit of practicing the Eightfold Path. If you practice the Eightfold Path deeply, you're going to cultivate right wisdom and you're going to experience right liberation. So I just thought I would point that out, because you don't always see the Buddha talking about the tenfold path, but here in this teaching, he's talking about that. And then he goes on with a lot of other teachings as well. Do you guys have any questions on any of the things that he's talking about here, any of the qualities that he's talking about cultivating? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's go on to chapter 8. Would somebody like to read this chapter? Yes, sir. That was a long one, huh?
Sure. The discontentedness of heavenly beings and humans. Monks, heavenly beings and humans seek excitement in forms, have excitement in forms, excite in forms. With the change, fading away, and elimination of forms, heavenly beings and humans dwell in discontentedness. In the case of sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects, the discourses are similar to that of forms. But monks, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, has understood as they really are the cause and the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of forms. He does not seek excitement in forms, does not have excitement in forms, does not excite in forms. With the change, fading away, and elimination of forms, the Tathagata resides joyful. In the case of sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects, the discourses are similar to that of forms.
Okay, so this relates back to the book that we studied prior to this, which volume 9 of the book series is about the 6 sense spaces. This is where the Buddha is teaching you about central desire in the mind. These 10 fetters, or these 10 pollutions, one of the real significant ones is called central desire. This is where the mind has a longing and yearning through the 6 sense spaces, wanting agreeable contact. And if you get agreeable contact through the 6 sense spaces, you get pleasant feelings. But then if you get disagreeable contact through the 6 sense spaces, you get painful feelings. The 6 sense spaces are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, which you've probably learned these in science. But then there's a 6th one, which is the mind itself. And what the mind is doing is it's longing and yearning. You want agreeable contact. So you want to see permanently agreeable things. And if you see things that are agreeable to you, like maybe a child walking down the street holding the hand of its mother, that's so sweet. Look at that. That's so nice. You get pleasant feelings maybe when you see that. But then maybe you turn the corner and you see a parent slap their child across the face. And now this might be disagreeable to you. If you see it with your eyes, this is disagreeable because of the craving in the mind. We're not talking about what's wise or unwise, because in my opinion, it's unwise to hit a child for any reason whatsoever, but this could be disagreeable to you. But also you can take more simple, like say you have a brand new car and your car is nice and beautiful and shiny. And now that's agreeable to you and you feel pleasant feelings. But then when you come outside and you see a scratch on your car, this might be disagreeable to you. And this is because the eyes are seeing something that's disagreeable. And the same thing's happening with the ears. There's certain sounds, certain music, certain things that you find agreeable and certain things you find disagreeable based on cravings, desires, attachments in the mind. So what the Buddha is saying is if you seek excitement through these sense spaces, then your mind isn't liberated. It's going to experience this discontentedness. So these heavenly beings and human beings dwell in discontentedness because they seek excitement in forms, in sounds, in odors, in flavors, in physical objects touching the body, and then mental objects. You want agreeable things to permanently come in contact with these six sense bases. But because of the universal truth of impermanence, you can't get permanently agreeable things to come in contact with. So that's why he's saying with the change, fading away, and elimination of forms, meaning when you experience impermanence, based on things you see, hear, smell, taste, certain physical objects that come in contact with the body or mental objects. When you experience impermanence in the unenlightened state, you'll experience discontentedness. And that's why he's saying heavenly beings and humans dwell in this discontentedness, because essentially there's this impermanence that the unenlightened mind doesn't understand. But he's saying for himself, who is enlightened, he's an arahant. That's what an enlightened being is they're an arahant. But every enlightened being is an arahant, but a perfectly, fully enlightened Buddha, they've become enlightened by themselves. That's what makes a individual a fully, perfectly enlightened Buddha, is they didn't have any help from any teachers or any guides. But everybody who's enlightened is an arahant. He's referring to himself as the Tathagata. The Tathagata means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth. So now what he's saying is, because he has understood as it really is, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, the escape, in the case of all of these six sense bases, when things change, because he doesn't seek excitement in forms, doesn't seek excitement in through these six sense bases, that when things change and fade away and they are eliminated, when he experiences impermanence, his mind stays joyful. He doesn't experience discontentedness because his mind has been trained to not crave, to not hold on to things, craving permanence. So when he experiences impermanence, because he's in the same world as you, he's in this impermanent world, but he's trained his mind to not crave and cling, so that when impermanence is experienced, it's like, okay, there's some impermanence, no big deal, this is normal. But in the unenlightened state, because of the lack of wisdom, the individual doesn't understand the universal truth of impermanence. So therefore your mind is easily shaken up, because you're clinging and you're craving something to be permanent. And when you experience impermanence, the mind doesn't like that. So it's easily shaken up. And this is happening through all the six sense bases: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. The mind itself, this is where, like, say in the present moment, you're thinking about something in the past, either pleasurable or painful. In the present moment, you can be discontent because of thinking about something in the past. So say in the past you were very rich and very wealthy, and now you don't have much money, and now you're craving and longing and yearning for that same experience in the past. Well, in the present moment, you're going to have painful feelings because of that. Or say there's something that very painful that happened in the past, in your past, in this particular life, and your mind's clinging to it, and your mind is thinking about that thing. Well, in the present moment, you can have painful feelings because of something in the past. That's how the sixth sense base. And the same thing can be happening for the future. You can be longing, yearning for pleasurable things in the future, or you can be very scared or very fearful of painful things that are going to happen in the future. And now in the present moment, your mind is discontent. So you can eliminate all this longing, yearning, and these cravings through these six sense bases by training the mind. And then you can ultimately get to the point where your mind has been trained to understand impermanence, that this is normal. So when you have that favorite shirt that you bought and then it gets ripped or torn, instead of getting angry, you can just understand that it's impermanence. Just like the batteries in these microphones, right? The battery went out. This is just impermanence. When we started our class, we had a certain number of people here, and now we have a different number of people here. That's just impermanence, right? But if your mind is craving and clinging to things to be permanent, then when things start changing, your mind will be shaken up by that. So you can liberate the mind from this by eliminating the craving and the clinging. Anytime your mind is discontent, there's just something your mind's craving and clinging to, and it doesn't like the impermanence. Whether it's grandma and grandpa dying, whether it's a boyfriend or girlfriend that you guys have ended the relationship, whether it's a job that you no longer work at or anything else, whether it's your bank account was one balance, now it's a different balance. If you're angry and frustrated about anything, it's because your mind's craving and clinging, wanting permanence, not understanding impermanence. Do you guys have any questions on this chapter? Yes, sir.
So are you saying like it's excited, or it's okay to be excited for something in the future, but not clinging to that excitement and not like holding on to it, like knowing that if it doesn't happen, that's okay, right?
Yeah, so when we talk about excitement and all these other pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, these are what we call conditioned feelings, that based on some condition, your mind now experiences this pleasant feeling. And this is a conditional feeling. And the problem with this is that once that condition changes due to impermanence, your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration. So if you have something that you know is going to happen in the future, if your mind craves it, then you will be excited about that thing. And now if it happens, you'll be excited. But if it doesn't happen, you'll be frustrated. But what you would like to get to is where you know, like, okay, this thing's happening in the future. Oh, this will be really great. I'm looking forward to it. This will be wonderful. And then if it happens, okay, great, it happens. But if it doesn't happen, you're completely fine with that
Okay,
too.
great, it didn't happen.
Right. It didn't happen. So like say like your mom calls you and says, hey, I'm going to come visit you in Thailand. I would like to visit you in Thailand. If you got really excited that she's coming, but then she calls you like a week before and says, I can't come, you would be sad. Right. Whereas if it's like, oh, great, Mom, you're coming, that'd be wonderful to see you. I'll make some plans and we'll have some good times in Chiang Mai. But then she calls you a week ahead and says, hey, I'm sorry, I can't come. Oh, no big deal, Mom. I understand. Whatever you got to deal with, you take care of that and we can see each other another time. And you can maintain your contentedness and your joy. Right. So that's what it means to have these unconditioned mental qualities where you can maintain peace and joy all the time because you're not allowing the mind to have those conditioned feelings. And that's why it's so important to understand those conditioned pleasant feelings as part of the problem, because we don't typically understand that the conditioned happiness and excitement is part of the problem. So you can look forward to things and be like, oh, Mom, it'd be great to see you. You know, please, yeah, come. I'd be glad to see you. I'll pick you up at the airport. But then when she calls and says, oh, I can't come, you're just like, all right, I understand. No worries. You know, you just see that this is impermanence and your mind never clung to it to begin with. Right. So therefore, when she changes her plans, you're not upset or anything like that.
And it's important not to like dwell in the future excitement because that's dwelling in the futureness, right?
Right. You're not interested in getting that conditional excitement at all.
Stay now.
Yeah, you're just thinking like, okay, well, it'll be great to see Mom. I'm looking forward to seeing Mom. We'll spend time together. But if she can't come for any reason, that's okay. I understand. This is impermanence. It doesn't mean she doesn't love me or anything like this. And she's going to my sister's house. It doesn't mean she loves me more or loves my sister more and loves me less. That's oftentimes what the mind is going to tell itself, this whole story. And because it's not getting what it wants. So instead, you can just reside peaceful and joyful and just understand it's impermanence. Mom's making whatever decisions she thinks is best, and you just accept those decisions rather than trying to force her to do something that you would want to do. So I wouldn't think of it as like you want to get excited, because that's not ideal because your mind's up here in discontentedness, and then you're just going to drop off into the sadness at some point. Have you ever been so excited you like trip and fell or like made some other unwise decision? Yeah. So that's why you're not interested in your mind getting to that point where it's all shaken up with excitement. So your mind, you would like to get it to that unshakable liberation where you can be steady and calm all the time. But of course, you're going to be like, yeah, it'd be great to see you, Mom. Love to see you. Yeah, please come. You know, I'll pick you up at the airport. So you're going to be enthused that she's coming, but you're not going to dwell in that and hold on to it and cling to it.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's see. We've got 2 more chapters here, and then this is done. We'll keep going. Okay. Would somebody like to read this one? Sure.
this one. Yeah. Discontentedness because of the sixth sense basis. Monks, heavenly beings, and humans seek excitement in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects. Have excitement in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects. Excite in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects. With the change, fading away, and elimination of forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects, heavenly beings, and humans dwell in discontentedness.
Okay, so this is exactly what we were just talking about, the exact same thing, just worded a little bit differently. So I imagine you guys don't have questions on this one, but if you do, let me know and I'll help you. No? Okay. All right, so let's go to the very last one. Would somebody like to read this? Okay.
Consideration to go forth into homelessness. Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still unawakened, not yet fully enlightened, I too, being myself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, sought what was also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. I sought what was also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. And what may be said to be subject birth to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement. Wife and children are subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement. Men and women slaves, goat and sheep, fowls and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver are subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement. These objects of attachment are subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement. And one who is tied to these things, obsessed with them and entirely craving them, being himself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, seeks what is also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement. Then I considered thus, why, being myself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, do I seek what is also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement? Suppose that, being myself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, I seek the unborn, unaging, unailing, deathless enlightenment, sorrowless and undefiled supreme security from bondage, nibbana, enlightenment. Later, while still young, a black-haired young man endowed with usefulness in the prime of life, though my mother and father wished otherwise and wept with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. Here, Bharadvaja, before my enlightenment, while I was still unawakened, not yet fully enlightened, I considered thus: household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy while living in a home to lead the holy life entirely perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is talking about himself being subject to impermanence. When he's talking about myself being subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, and all these other things, he's talking about he's subject to impermanence, that because he was born, he has to die, just like every single one of us. And he's saying, okay, I'm subject to this impermanence, and I'm also seeking, before he was enlightened, he was seeking satisfaction or fulfillment in things that are impermanent. This is what the unenlightened mind does, is it seeks this permanent satisfaction, this permanent joy, this permanent happiness, but we seek it in the unenlightened state in impermanent things. And as long as you're forming your inner feelings on a conditioned object, then it's only a matter of time before your happiness is gone. So if you get happy when it's sunny outside, all it needs to do is be raining and you're going to be sad or frustrated. Or if you get happy when your bank account is, all it needs to do is drop below that balance and you're going to be sad or angry. Or if you get happy when you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, when you don't have a girlfriend or boyfriend, you're going to be sad. And we could go on and on and on with all these different examples, right? So what the Buddha is sharing here is don't seek excitement in conditioned objects. It's not the object itself that is the problem. So here he's pointing out that wife and children and these other things are all impermanent, essentially. That's not the actual problem. He never describes having relationships with people as a problem. Instead, it's the craving in the mind. It's when you hold on to your mom and your dad, you're craving them to be permanent. You're wanting them to be a certain way. And then when they die, you're sad or you're frustrated or you're feeling grief because you want them to be permanent. Or you want, during this life, you want mom or dad to be a certain way. And when they're that way, you're happy. And when they're not that way, you're frustrated or angry. Or maybe with brothers and sisters or other people as well. So if you can train your mind to understand that you're not going to agree with what everybody does, you're not going to agree what everybody says, and that's okay. Because of impermanence, these things are constantly changing. And if you can just learn how to love the person and not crave for them to be any particular way, you can just love them as they are, then you can reside harmoniously with all beings. But this is the real work that the mind has to do to be able to understand impermanence, not just with relationships, but with the things around you. Say you drop your mobile phone and the screen breaks and shatters. If you are attached to your phone, you will be frustrated or irritated when that occurs. It's not the phone. It's not the object that is the problem. It's the mind craving and longing and yearning for it. So you can have a phone, a computer, a car, a house. You can even have life partner and children and still get to enlightenment. But you need to learn how to do these things without attachment. And that's what the ultimate path is. And here the Buddha is just pointing that out and helping you to understand that. And then ultimately what he gets to is he talks about this household life being crowded and dusty, because being in the household life during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was significantly more difficult to get to enlightenment, as we talked about earlier, where going forth into the ordained lifestyle would have been a lot more straightforward, because you're not having to take care of your house, you're not having to have a career, you're not taking care of a wife or husband or children, you're not plowing the fields, you're not carrying water, you're not doing all these other things. So he's saying it's very challenging, because in the household life, there's a lot of temptations, right? Like you guys click on the TV and you see certain things, and there's all this sex and drugs and alcohol. You have all these sensual desires that are constantly tugging and pulling at you. So there's a lot more temptations. Being ordained, you're living in a monastery, you're living a much environment where there's not all these things necessarily going on as much. But still, those beings in the ordained life still need to overcome those same challenges. You can get to enlightenment, as I said, in the household life. Nowadays, it's much more likely than during the lifetime of the Buddha. But he's pointing out to his students during his lifetime that, yes, it's much more challenging to get to enlightenment as a household practitioner than as an ordained practitioner. But even as an ordained practitioner, there are certain challenges that they need to overcome. So the way that I think about it is, to get to enlightenment as a household practitioner, you actually need to cultivate your wisdom much more deeply, much more significantly, because in the ordained life, if you're married or you have children or what have you, you're going to walk away from all of that and go into a life of homelessness, which that's one way to do it and to get rid of your attachments. But people sometimes get confused. They think that you have to eliminate your relationships in order to get to enlightenment. This isn't true. You can have a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or children. You can have a house and a career and all these other things. You just need to learn how to do it without craving, desire, attachment. And in order to do that, you need a lot more wisdom. So you're going to need to have a lot more discipline. You're going to need to have a lot more determination, because these other things might tend to get in the way, right, of you dedicating your time and effort to getting to enlightenment. But you can still accomplish it. So do you guys have any questions on this particular chapter? Yes, sir.
So there are some monasteries that require somebody who wants to ordain to get permission from their parents before actually going through it. There's a section in here where the Buddha's talking about, his parents crying and whatnot. So I was just curious what the Buddha said, if anything, on this subject.
Yeah, so during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was a lot of people coming from the royal family, which he was part of. He was the prince destined to become a king, and he stepped down from that. And then his son, his wife, his mother, his cousins and brother-in-laws and people like this were all coming to get enlightened and learn from the Buddha. So his father came to him, pleading and begging him to stop ordaining people from the royal family, because his father was attached to the royal family. He wanted this to continue permanently, not understanding that this royal family is impermanent. So the Buddha, seeing this misery and despair from his father, instituted guidance that if you would like to get enlightened, you need to have the permission from your family. Living at home with your parents would need to agree that you can get to that you can ordain. Or if you're in a relationship with a partner, your partner and your children need to agree that you can get ordained, because by you leaving the household, you are now putting an extra burden on your family to then pick up the slack, so to speak, particularly during this lifetime. Because if you have, say, 6 family members living together and everybody's doing a certain share of the work in order to sustain their life, and one person or 2 people from that household come to ordain with the Buddha, now those people don't have the workers to be able to sustain their life, and this can put hardship in the community. So the Buddha wasn't interested in causing difficulties in the community, so that's why he instituted this guidance. And it stays that way even now, that if you're living a life alongside your parents or with a partner, they're going to need to support you. With you being a 30-something-year-old male, you're independent. Even though you may live with your parents and go visit them and spend time with them, you're not required to have their approval. It's wise for you to talk to them and help them to understand if you decide you're going to ordain, but it's not required at this particular stage in your life. But if you were like 18, or if you were, living alongside your parents very closely, it would be wise for you to get their approval and support. And oftentimes the people who are ordaining you will make sure that you've done that. Even sometimes at this age, they're going to evaluate that. They're going to say, do you have a partner? Do you have children? Have you talked with them about ordaining? How are your parents? Are your parents alive? Have you discussed that with them? Because if they're going to accept you into their community, they would like to make sure that you do that in a successful way. Whereas if you ordain and then you've got mom and dad tugging and pulling at you to not be ordained, or you've got a partner or children tugging and pulling at you, then this will hinder you from being able to potentially make your way to enlightenment, because your mind is still holding on to those things. So in order to help somebody get to enlightenment, it's an enormous amount of work, an enormous amount of effort. And if you're choosing to become ordained, or you're choosing to get to enlightenment, the Buddha and nowadays teachers are interested in being sure that you're fully able to move towards ordination without the clinging to all these other things. And those people are also not clinging to you as well.
So it sounds like it's more of like a financial thing. The guidance saying, just so that it's not a burden financially on the family that you're leaving, then you should get the permission.
It's about the mind. The mind is holding on. The mind is clinging, and sometimes it can be financially, right? Like that if somebody is providing some kind of financial support to the family, then the mind is not only clinging to the person, but it's clinging to the financial support potentially as well. So in terms of determining whether or not you can ordain, each individual person who's choosing to ordain you is going to talk to you to figure out for themselves in what situation do they feel comfortable ordaining you, and they're going to make the determination for themselves. And because of impermanence, each person's going to decide differently whether or not they are going to ordain you or not. And the reason why the Buddha implemented this guidance is because it can put a burden on the family, yes, to acquire resources, but then their mind is also clinging because they need those resources. They need potentially you. Their mind might be clinging to that individual to be in the household for any number of reasons. Financial support can be one of those. So the Buddha's interested to make sure the people have let go. And if they're supporting you to become ordained, their minds let go to a certain degree. They may not have fully let go yet, but they've let go to a certain degree.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions here online or here at the temple. So what I'll do then is just thank you guys for reading. Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you for your dedication to learning the teachings of the Buddha. Next week on Saturday, I'm going to be sharing the next 10 chapters in volume 10, which is chapters 11 through 20. Students are welcome to read those before class and or after class. You'll actually get a lot more benefit if you decide to continue in the Pali Canon and English study group, because you'll see the words of the Buddha, the reference, and the words from me to be able to help you to be able to learn and then have certain questions in class. But even if you didn't read, you can still come to class and you can see you can get some benefit out of the class the way that I teach it. And then on Sunday and Wednesday is the group learning program. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'm going to be teaching Volume 1, Chapter 10, and this is a more traditional style of learning where I'm going to be teaching, and I'll be using some visual aids, and then about every 20-30 minutes or so I open up to questions and see what questions students have. So if you're looking to build a foundation in the path to enlightenment, that's a perfect program for you, whether you join here at the temple or you join online. I teach it on Sunday and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. The 9 a.m. class is here at the temple, and I live stream it. The 9 p.m. class, I do it from home, and I just live stream it from home. And there's not a live audience there. It's just online live audience, not at my house. So you guys are welcome to join either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. no matter what time zone you're in the world. There should be a live class for you. And then they're recorded on our YouTube channel and Facebook and on our podcast. So you can digest it even after the live class, maybe Monday or Tuesday or what have you. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to also be teaching here. I'm going to be teaching breathing mindfulness meditation and then opening up to any questions that students have. So thank you all for joining here at the temple, and those of you guys online, perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee Kap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.